Good morning. Mr. Castleton.
May it please the Court, my name is Castleton. I appear with my learned friends, Ms Ward of Senior Counsel, Mr Harker and Mr Wilcox, assisting Your Honour in relation to Your Honour's inquiry into the 2019-2020 bushfires and inquests into related deaths.
Thank you. I'll just take appearances.
Your Honour, my name is Newton. I appear with Ms Woodland on behalf of the Commissioner of the Rural Fire Service, the Forestry Corporation of New South Wales and the National Parks and Wildlife Service for the first 2 weeks, and Mr Free SC will be appearing in the third week of Your Honour's inquiry in this tranche.
Thank you, Mr Newton.
Thank you. This is the resumption of Your Honour's hearings into a range of inquests and inquiries arising from the 2019-2020 New South Wales bushfire season. A series of coronial inquests have been and will be conducted to determine the manner and cause of death of the 25 people who died in these fires. This will necessitate findings pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act as to the deceased person's identity, date and place of death, and manner and cause of death. It is important to identify these people again, specifically at the outset of these opening remarks, to honour their memories and to acknowledge their family, friends and communities who have endured the loss in what can only be described as truly horrific circumstances. The people who lost their lives in the 2019-2020 New South Wales bushfires are Gwendolyn Hyde and Robert Lindsay, who died after fire reached their property on 8 October 2019, George Knoll, who died after fire reached his property on 8 November 2019, Julie Fletcher, who died after fire reached her property on 8 November 2019, Barry Parsons, who died after fire reached his property on 8 November 2019, Christopher Sava, who died after fire reached his property on 8 November 2019, Vivian Chaplin, who died on 9 November 2019 after being medically transferred to hospital following injury sustained after fire reached her property on 8 November 2019, Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dyer, who each died while on duty for the RFS at the Green Wattle Creek fire on 19 December 2019, Russell Bratby, who died on 29 December 2019 of injuries sustained after fire reached his property on 7 November 2019, Samuel McPaul, who died while on duty for the RFS at the Green Valley Taumalmo fire on 30 December 2019, Lawrence Andrew, who died after fire reached his property on 31 December 2019, Colin Burns, who died after fire reached his property on 31 December 2019, John Butler Sr., who died after fire reached his property on 31 December 2019, Michael Campbell, who died after fire reached his property on 31 December 2019, Robert Sorway and Patrick Sorway, who each died after fire reached their property on 31 December 2019, John Smith, who died after fire reached his property on 31 December 2019, Richard Steele, who died after fire reached his property, again on 31 December 2019, David Harrison, who died after fire reached a property where he was staying on 4 January 2020, Ross Rickson, who died on 18 January 2020, following injuries sustained in connection with a fire on 31 December 2019. Ian Macbeth, Paul Hudson and Rick De Morgan, all United States firefighters who died in service to this country on 23 January 2020, and Michael Clark, who died after fire reached his property on 23 January 2020. Even in reading out that list, it is immediately apparent that many deaths occurred across the state on the same days. As illustrated on the maps that will now be shown, there were multiple fires and multiple fatalities across the state on 7 and 8 November 2019. And 30 and 31 December 2019. The evidence demonstrates these were days of particularly severe fire conditions. Separate to the coronial inquests, although obviously related as a matter of fact, a series of coronial inquiries have been conducted to determine the cause and origin of a select series of fires that were reported to the coroner. According to statistics included in the final report of the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry, there were, and I pause, there were at least 11,774 fires across New South Wales during the 2019-2020 bushfire season, which ran from July 2019 until March of 2020. These fires were estimated to have burnt over 5.52 million hectares of land. That equates, Your Honour, to about 7% of the state's total land area. 39% of New South Wales State Forest and 35% of New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service estates. The fires destroyed approximately 2,476 homes, 3 schools, 284 facilities, 5,559 outbuildings, and damaged 1,034 homes, 196 facilities, and 2,017 outbuildings. According to some reports, the number of livestock that perished across the state exceeded 13,000. These figures are, of course, estimates only. Not everyone affected by the fires reported damage to the authorities or wanted to participate in police investigations on behalf of Your Honour. Not all of the estimated 11,774 fires were or needed to be reported by New South Wales Police to this court. Reporting obligations were and are much more focused than that and will be the subject of further evidence during the course of the hearing into the Kriwa cluster of fires to be held on the 19th of September this year. About 95 fires were originally reported to Your Honour for investigation following the 2019-2020 bushfires season. The extent of their reach is generally reflected in the map now displayed. I'll just see whether we're able to magnify that to assist you. Each of the fires so reported was accompanied by a coronial brief of evidence collated by New South Wales Police. Each brief was reviewed by the council assisting team to determine whether cause and origin of the subject fire was clear on the evidence already available and whether matters raised within witness statements or other evidence otherwise warranted further investigation. Some additional evidence was obtained in particular matters where the council assisting team determined there were evidentiary gaps to be filled and New South Wales Police and other government agencies were able to respond to requisitions arising. The council assisting team next advised on those fires that, having already been sufficiently investigated, did not need to proceed to a hearing in court. 52 fires fell into that category, and Your Honour has determined to dispense with an inquiry into those fires. This process is permitted by Section 31 of the Coroners Act, which relevantly provides, and I quote, "A coroner may dispense with the inquiry if the coroner is of the opinion that A, the cause and origin of the fire are sufficiently disclosed, or B, an inquiry into the cause and origin of the fire is unnecessary." This has left 43 fires which have proceeded to a cause and origin hearing. This number is an approximation only because many of the coronial briefs that are counted as one fire in fact involve investigations into a number of smaller fires that later merged or coalesced. The geographical extent of those fires is shown on this map. Okay, I'll just see whether we're able to expand that to assist you. The cause and origin hearings into each of these fires progressed over several months across 2021 and this year. These Stage 1 hearings were confined in scope, given that Section 31 of the Coroners Act provides, and I quote, "A coroner has jurisdiction to hold an inquiry concerning the cause and origin of a fire or explosion if the coroner is satisfied that the fire or explosion has destroyed or damaged any property within the state." Section 81, subsection 2 of the Act then requires the court to record findings as to the date, place and circumstances of each fire. Of the 43 fires that have been subject to cause and origin hearings, 20 will conclude at this stage, together with the 3 related inquests. Closing submissions into the following fires and related inquests will proceed as follows across the next 2 weeks. Today, Duns Road Fire, Ellerslie Range and East Ernie Creek Fire, and a related inquest into the death of David Harrison, and the Washpool State Forest Fire, Kumbaja. Tomorrow, 6 September, North Black Range, Pallarang Fire, Gulf Road, Emmaville and Torrington Fire, Bees Nest Fire, Guy Fawkes National Park, and the Liberation Trail Fire, Wednesday 7 September, Long Gully Road Drake Fire, and the inquest into the deaths of Robert Lindsay and Gwendolyn Hyde, the Werryberry Fire, Adaminaby Complex Fire, Adaminaby and the Border Rockton Fire, Timbilica. Next Monday, 12 September, Busby Flat, Rapville Fire, Rumba Complex Fire, Dingo Tops Road, Tappan Tops National Park, Ruin Castle Fire, Kadumba Valley, and the Little L Complex Fire, Laguna. Next Tuesday, 13 September, Mile Creek Road, Bora Ridge, Gospers Mountain Fire, Wallamai National Park, and the Hillville Fire, Hillville. And finally, next Wednesday, 14 September, Stockyard Flat Fire, Yarrowitch, and the inquest into the death of Russell Bradbury and the Palmer's Oakey Fire, Upper Turon. Turning, if I may, Your Honour, to the jurisdiction to inquire more broadly into nominated fires. In addition to the cause and origin jurisdiction that all Stage 1 fires have been subject to, the court has a broader power to hold a general inquiry which, where directed, permits examination of circumstances including, but not limited to, a fire's cause and origin. Such an inquiry must take place if Your Honour is of the opinion that a general inquiry should be held. It is pursuant to this power that the court will next be considering representative case studies in a further 16 fires. To this end, on 12 August 2022, Your Honour directed that, pursuant to Section 32, subsection 3 of the Coroners Act, a general inquiry be held into the following matters. Inquiry into the fire at Kangawalla, Diehard. Inquiry into the Creewar cluster of fires comprising the Creewar Road, Glen Allen Fire, the Big Jack Mountain Road, Cathcart Fire, and the Postman's Trail, Tangawongalo Fire. Inquiry into the fire at Mount Mckenzie Road, Tenterfield. Inquiry into the fire at Gross Valley, Mount Wilson. inquiry into the fire at Falford Road, Darrawank, inquiry into the fire at Badger Forest and Dewar National Park, Kundella, inquiry into the fire at Green Valley, Taumalmo, inquiry into the fire at Green Wattle Creek, Lake Barragorang, inquiry into the fire at Keaton Road, South Arm, and inquiry into the Currawong cluster of fires comprising the Currawong fire, the Csiro fire, the Morton fire, the Clyde Mountain fire, and the Charlie's Forest fire. Your Honour, the purpose of the case study hearings is to consider systemic issues of public importance. These may be broadly summarised as the investigation of fires by the New South Wales Police and New South Wales Rural Fire Service, communications and emergency warnings, bushfire risk classification, fire prediction modelling, vehicle design and safety, and decision-making around strategic backburning. Such issues might have arisen in very many fires, but only select fires that best highlight each issue will now be considered in further detail. These case study hearings will also be used as a vehicle to consider the response to recommendations arising from other government inquiries and the potential need for any additional recommendations. That is, where the court considers it necessary or desirable to do so, the court can make, pursuant to Section 82 of the Act, recommendations in relation to any matter connected with a death, the subject of an inquest, or a fire, the subject of an inquiry, including on matters going to public health and safety. The remaining fires and related inquests are a group where further consideration is being given about the impact of Stage 2 evidence on the conclusion of those matters and whether progression of the Stage 1 hearing may be required. Further information will be provided to parties about these matters later this year. If I turn now, Your Honour, to progress of Your Honour's coronial inquest and inquiries to date, it is, of course, now 3 years since the 2019-2020 bushfire season commenced unseasonably early in July of 2019. 2 further bushfire seasons have come and gone, and another, 2022-2023, will do so before Your Honour's series of inquiries and inquests finally conclude. In considering the time that has passed, one cannot lose sight of the circumstances in which Your Honour's investigations commenced. This, Your Honour, should be explicitly placed on the record. The investigation process commenced in 2019 and grew in scope as the fires themselves grew and grew across the season. Then COVID-19 and an initial lockdown commencing in March of 2020 inhibited further investigations in the short to medium term. The loss of life, the destruction of property, and the sheer geographical reach of the fires triggered important investigations in the aftermath at a state and national level, including the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry, a Royal Commission and Senate Committee inquiry. These coronial hearings sit within this context and cannot replicate the work of the other inquiries. Your Honour had attended some fire scenes in the immediate aftermath of the fires. Your Honour Your Honour had intended to visit other scenes once the public health orders permitted this through 2020 and 2021. Your Honour also intended to conduct the hearings in the regions as close as possible to the communities affected by the fires. Unfortunately, the pandemic prevented this. When hearings commenced in September of last year, the state was again locked down, and Your Honour, court staff and those assisting Your Honour needed to follow the public health orders and seek permission to travel here in Lidcombe within an LGA of concern to conduct the hearing with other parties appearing via AVL facilities. As it transpired, COVID-19 meant that most of Your Honour's hearings had to be conducted at the Coroners Court complex in Lidcombe via audio-visual means, with the exception of 2 short weeks sitting in Katoomba during June of this year. Your Honour, this required a great level of cooperation and coordination from all parties and their legal representatives and all witnesses and family members who participated in the proceedings. Coupled with the pandemic were the devastating floods which impacted parts of the state, even as Your Honour was taking evidence relating to the fires across the same area. In particular, Your Honour's hearings into the bushfires affecting the northern part of the state occurred shortly after extreme flooding in the northern rivers in February of this year and amidst recovery efforts. It is a credit to all involved that witnesses were able to make themselves available to give evidence remotely, even under exceptionally trying circumstances. The passage of time since the 2019-2020 bushfire season and the conduct of these proceedings has been regrettable, but has also brought some unlooked for but positive developments. As stated earlier, a number of other inquiries with broader reach resources than these Coronial proceedings have concluded in the meantime. Most particularly, the final report of the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry is before Your Honour, along with the final report of the Royal Commission into National Natural Disaster Arrangements and documents arising from the Senate Finance and Public Administration References Committee report, lessons to be learned in relation to the Australian bushfire season 2019 to 2020. This means this court has a unique opportunity to build upon the findings of those earlier inquiries and to consider the responses to the recommendations arising from them. Whilst much has occurred since the 2019-2020 bushfire season, the trauma and the loss experienced by communities across the state is not forgotten. It will continue to be felt into the future and underlines the continued importance of these inquiries. I will now return to a broad overview of events across the 2019-2020 season. I do this because each individual hearing has referred to competing demands for resources as a result of other fires burning at the same time as subject fires. And it is important to step back and look at the statewide context. I'll just have displayed now, Your Honour, a map which provides that overview. Your Honour, this map showing the fires that have proceeded to inquiry by Your Honour provides a visual testament of the enormous geographic impact of the 2019-2020 bushfire season on the state. It shows just the area affected by the 43 fires which have been subject to a Stage 1 hearing, not the full reach of the 11,774 fires reported to police across that season. Furthermore, Your Honour, the map cannot represent the experiences of those on the ground faced with the trauma of the loss of loved ones, homes, stock, pets, livelihoods, and the risk to their very own lives. Those impacts cannot be quantified. A small insight into those experiences can be obtained from this clip, which tells part of the story of residents and firefighters in the town of Balmoral who were facing the ferocious Wattle Creek fire on 19 December 2019.
You're in an absolute firestorm. It was day, but it was night. We fought our way back here because the other call came through that 35 people were now in the station, and the station was actually being impacted now.
When we got in the fire shed, everything was all hazy.
Oh, it was chaos. It really was. The fire shed was already under amber attack at that stage.
Outside, it was roaring.
Yeah, it was. You could hear the embers hitting the shed.
Our fire station is the place of last resort. They believed they were all going to die in here that night, potentially. We were running out of water. Firefighters had stayed and tried to defend. Just through sheer exhaustion, they'd collapsed where they were. We were absolutely spent.
Your Honour, that video clip is an extract from the documentary A Fire Inside Green Wattle, and the relevant people speaking was Mr O'Connor and Balmoral residents Justin and Helena Cam. As Your Honour will recall, Balmoral was one of many communities impacted by bushfire in the 2019-2020 season. We, of course, cannot list them all. However, a closer consideration of this map, which I'll have displayed shortly, illustrates the sheer number of communities affected. If we could just zoom in, please, to category number 1. One of the earliest fires was the Mount Mckenzie Road fire. Over a period of 12 days in September 2019, it burned over 2,500 hectares in the Tenterfield local government area. If we move to number 3, Your Honour, this is the Long Gully Road fire. This fire in northern New South Wales is believed to have started in late August 2019 and was out by late October 2019. It burnt over 70,000 hectares and impacted on towns in the Tenterfield and Clarence Valley local government areas. Gwendolyn Hyde and Robert Lindsay died on 8 October 2019 when the fire impacted their property at Goonbar. If we track to number 4, here we have, Your Honour, the Bees Nest and Liberation Trail fires. The Bees Nest fire is believed to have started in late August 2019 and the Liberation Trail fire in late October 2019. The Bees Nest fire burned over 110,000 hectares and the Liberation Trail fire over 180,000 hectares. Both fires impacted on properties in the Clarence Valley local government area, and the Liberation Trail fire spread into the Coffs Harbour local government area. If we now move to number 5, this region of the map shows the location of the Busby Flat Road fire. The Busby Flat Road fire is believed to have started in early October of 2019 and was declared out by early December 2019. It burned over 50,000 hectares in the Richmond Valley local government area. Coming, if I may, to number 6. The Richmond Valley local government area was also affected by the Mile Creek Road fire. From mid-October 2019 to late December 2019, it burned around 120,000 hectares. Coming, if we may, to number 7. It should be number 8. Is that right? Moving to the Keaton Road fire. The Keaton Road fire is believed to have started in mid-October 2019 It burned over 30,000 hectares in the Nambucca Valley local government area before merging with the Carrai East Fire in late November 2019. Christopher Sava died at this property, and Your Honour, I incorrectly referred to 7, it is in fact 6. Christopher Sava died at his property in South Arm on 8 November 2019 in a car accident when the Keaton Road fire was threatening his property. On 10 November 2019, firefighters Irene Pachos and Daryl Aldridge were seriously injured when a damaged tree fell on their fire truck. Coming, if we may, to number 7. This, Your Honour, shows the location of the Bills Crossing fire. The Bills Crossing fire is believed to have started in late October 2019 and burned until late December 2019. It burned over 10,000 hectares, predominantly in the Mid-Coast local government area. Julie Fletcher died on 8 November 2019 when the Bills Crossing fire impacted her home in Johns River. Zooming in, if we could, to number 8. The map here depicts the Carrai Creek, Carrai East and Stockyard Flat fires. From October 2019 to January 2020, the Carrai Creek and Carrai East fires collectively burnt 380,000 hectares in the Armidale and Kempsey local government areas. Barry Parsons died on 8 November 2019 while trying to escape the Carrai East fire, which impacted his property near the small village of Willawarren. The Stockyard Flat fire started on 26 October 2019 and was amalgamated with the Carrai Creek fire on 11 November 2019, which was itself out by January 2020. The Stockyard Creek fire burned around 70,000 hectares of land within the Walker local government area. The Stockyard Flat fire impacted on Russell Bradbury's property in Yarrowitch on 7 November 2019, at which time Mr Bradbury sustained injuries which caused his death weeks later in hospital. Coming, if we could, to number 9. Some of the biggest fires in the 2019-2020 season were located to the west and northwest of Sydney, being the Gospers Mountain, Gross Valley, Little L and Palmer's Oakey fires. The Gospers Mountain fire started on 26 October 2019. It burnt a staggering 510,000 hectares of land throughout the Lithgow, Blue Mountains, Hawkesbury, Singleton and Cessnock local government areas. The Gross Valley fire is believed to have started as a result of a backburn on 14 December 2019 near Mount Wilson, undertaken to protect local communities from the Gospers Mountain fire to the north. Collectively, the Gospers Mountain and Gross Valley fires burned over 530,000 hectares and were both recorded as out by early to mid-February 2020. The Little L fire, which later merged with a number of other fires to form the Little L complex of fires, is believed to have started around 22 November 2019 to the west of the Gospers Mountain fire. It burned over 170,000 hectares in the Cessnock and Singleton local government areas and was declared out by late January of 2020. The Palmer's Oakey fire is believed to have started on 4 December 2019 and was out by late January 2020. It burned over 15,000 hectares in the Lithgow and Midwestern local government areas. Coming, if we may, to number 10. This is the scene of the Gulf Road fire. The Gulf Road fire is believed to have started in late October 2019 and was out by late November of that year. It burned over 70,000 hectares in the Tenterfield and Glen Innes 7 local government areas. Coming to number 11 to the south, this is the Kangarwalla Fire, Your Honour. The Kangarwalla Fire is believed to have started in late October 2019 and was out by late November 2019. It burned over 20,000 hectares in the Glen Innes 7 local government area. On 8 November 2019, the fire decimated parts of the Waitalaba community, resulting in the deaths of Vivian Chaplin in hospital on the 9th of November 2019 and George Knoll on 8 November 2019. Coming, if we could please, to number 12. Next, Your Honour, will see the location for the Rumba complex fires. The Rumba dump fire is believed to have started in mid-October 2019. It merged with 3 other fires and was given the name Rumba Complex. It was declared out by late January 2020. It burned over 150,000 hectares and impacted properties in the Mid-Coast local government area. Turning now to number 13, this is the area affected by the Washpool Fire. The Washpool Fire, also referred to as the Washpool 2 Fire, is believed to have started in late October 2019. It burned over 130,000 hectares in the Clarence Valley local government area. It merged with other fires and was declared out, having merged with the Mount Sparabo fire on 7 January 2020. If we could move south to number 14. This is the Hillville and Falford Road Darrawank fires. The Hillville fire is believed to have started in early November 2019 and was declared out by late December 2019. It burned over 300,000 hectares in the Mid-Coast local government area. The Darrawank fire started on 26 October 2019 and merged with the Hillville fire on 13 November 2019. It burned about 3,000 hectares and impacted upon communities including Rainbow Flat, Falford, Darrawank and Halliday's Point. Coming now, please, to number 16. This is the location of the North Black Range Fire. The North Black Range Fire is believed to have started in late November 2019. It burned approximately 40,000 hectares in the Queanbeyan and Palorang local government area. It is believed to have burned until late January 2020. And then finally, number 18. Coming now to 16. The map shows the scene of the Currowan, Charlie's Forest and Clyde Mountain fires. The Currowan fire is believed to have commenced in late November 2019. It was images from this fire, as families took shelter from the fire on beaches, that captured many people's attention on New Year's Eve 2019. The Currowan fire burned approximately 315,000 hectares and commenced in the Shoalhaven local government area. Due to the huge size of the Currowan fire, inquiries were concurrently held into the related Charlie's Forest fire, which burned over 60,000 hectares in the Queanbeyan and Palorang local government area and impacted many properties. The Clyde Mountain fire, which burned approximately 100,000 hectares in the Eurobodalla local government area and impacted properties in several communities in the Shoalhaven and Eurobodalla areas, and the Moreton fire, which burned over 20,000 hectares in the Wingecarribee and Goulburn Mullery local government areas and damaged properties in communities including Bundanoon and Wingello. The Currowan fire merged with the Tianjara fire on 22 December 2019, which itself originated within the Shoalhaven local government area. All fires were out by early to mid-February 2020. 3 men died when the Currawong fire impacted their properties on 31 December 2019. Lawrence Andrew at Yatta Yatta, John Butler Sr. at another property in Yatta Yatta, and Michael Campbell at Sussex Inlet. If we come now to number 17, the scene of the Greenwattle Creek and Ruin Castle fires is now visible on screen. The Greenwattle Creek fire is believed to have started in late November 2019 and was out by mid-February 2020. It burned over 275,000 hectares in the Goulburn, Mawari, Oberon, Upper Lachlan, Wingecarribee and Wallandilly local government areas and impacted communities including Balmoral, Bargo and Jenolan. Rural Fire Service firefighters Geoffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer died on 19 December 2019 while fighting the Greenwattle Creek fire when their fire truck was struck by a tree in Buxton. The ruined Castle fire is believed to have started around 25 to 27 November 2019 and was out by mid-February 2020. It burned over 17,000 hectares and impacted properties and communities in the Blue Mountains local government area, including within the Megalong Valley. Coming now to number 18, this is the location, Your Honour, of the Duns Road fire. The Duns Road fire is believed to have started in late December 2019 and burned over 330,000 hectares and impacted communities in the Snowy Monero and Snowy Valley local government areas, particularly in the town of Batlow. It also caused significant damage to the Selwyn Snow Resort. It was out by mid-February of 2020. The Duns Road fire impacted a property in Wandalga on 4 January 2020, where David Harrison was staying. Mr. Harrison died in hospital that evening after being found unconscious after fighting the fire. Your Honour also undertook an inquiry into the East Ernie Creek Ellerslie Range fire, which is believed to have started in late December 2019 and burned approximately 407 hectares in the Snowy Valleys local government area. The East Ernie fire merged with the Duns Road fire on 10 January 2020, and both fires were out by mid-February 2020. Your Honour also undertook an inquiry into the Adaminaby complex of fires, which burned approximately 100,000 hectares and originated in the Snowy Monero local government area. The Adaminaby complex fire merged with the Duns Road fire in early January 2020. Coming now to number 19, the map now shows the location of the Green Valley fire. The Green Valley fire is believed to have started in late December 2019 and was out by mid-February 2020. It burned over 45,000 hectares in the Greater Hume local government area. On 30 December 2019, Rural Fire Service officer Samuel McPaul died when a fire truck he was a passenger in Jingellic, flipped as a result of a fire-generated vortex or fire tornado. Coming now to number 21, 20 and 21. This shows the location of the Badger Forest, Dua, Goodgood and Werryberry fires. The Badger Forest fire is believed to have started in late December 2019. It burned over 300,000 hectares in the Snowy Monero, Eurobodalla and Bega Valley local government areas and destroyed or damaged at least 1,800 structures, including many homes in Cobargo, Eurobodalla, Nerringunda, Kiwama, Verona and Wandella. The loss of life caused by the Badger Forest fire was horrific. On 31 December 2019, 5 men died when the Badger Forest Fire impacted their respective homes and properties. Colin Burns in Bellowra, Robert and Patrick Solway in Wandella, Richard Steele in Coolgalite, and John Smith in Nerringunda. Also on that day, the fire injured Ross Rickson at his property in Cobargo, leading to his hospitalisation and subsequent death on 18 January 2020. Mr Rickson died from ischemic heart disease while being treated in hospital for his facial burns. On 23 January 2020, Michael Clark died when the Badger Forest Fire impacted his property in Bodalla. The Kundella Ordua National Park fire is believed to have started in late December 2019. It burned approximately 2,500 hectares in the Eurobodalla local government area. The Good fire is believed to have started around 27 to 29 December 2019 and was out by early March 2020. The Good fire burned over 40,000 hectares, predominantly in the Snowy Monaro local government area. On 23 January 2020, 3 American firefighters, Paul Hudson, Ian Macbeth and Rick De Morgan Jr., died following a plane crash while fighting the Good fire in Peak View. The Werryberry fire is believed to have started in late December 2019. It burned over 25,000 hectares in the Bega Valley local government area. The Werryberry fire eventually merged with the Badger Forest fire in late January 2020. Turning now to number 22 in the southern portion of the state. This, Your Honour, is the location of the Border Fire. The Border Fire originated in Victoria in late December 2019 and crossed the New South Wales border within days of its starting. It burned over 190,000 hectares in the Snowy Monaro and Bega Valley local government areas and was out by early March 2020. The Border Fire crossed the border between New South Wales and Victoria a second time in early January 2020 and was called the Rockton Fire before it was managed as part of the Border Fire. It burned over 25,000 hectares and affected properties in the Snowy Monaro local government areas. Coming now to number 23. Finally, the court can see on the screen the Kreewar cluster fires. The Kreewar Road, Big Jack Mountain and Postman Trail fires, referred to as the Kreewar Complex, commenced in late January 2020 and were out by early March 2020. They collectively burned over 40,000 hectares in the Snowy Monaro and Bega Valley local government areas. Separate to the New South Wales context, spelled out in some detail by reference to the map that Your Honour has just seen, the Court has the benefit of the report arising from the Royal Commission into National Natural Disaster Arrangements, which provides a national context. The Royal Commission summarised as follows, and I quote, "The 2019-2020 bushfires started in Australia's hottest and driest year on record. Much of the country was in drought, and the first bushfire started in the middle of winter. Over the following months, fires burnt across tens of millions of hectares of land, threatening and displacing hundreds of communities. Many thousands of volunteers and professional emergency responders worked tirelessly and made great sacrifices to save lives, homes and precious natural landscape. 33 people died, including 6 Australian firefighters and 3 American aerial firefighters. Thousands of homes were destroyed or damaged. Smoke blanketed much of Australia, including capital cities, and contributed to hundreds of deaths. Nearly 3 billion animals were killed or displaced, and the fires harm many threatened species and ecological communities. Overall, the fires caused billions of dollars of damage. A currently 9-volume general brief of evidence, Your Honour, has been collated, which I will tender shortly. This general brief of evidence includes a plethora of documents relevant to all of the Stage 2 matters, including the reports from the previously mentioned inquiries. Other documents are focused upon broad themes such as prevailing weather in the lead-up to and across the bushfire season, the interpretation of lightning strike data, hazard reduction efforts in light of prevailing fuel loads and fuel dryness, fire prediction modelling, communication and emergency warning systems, rural fire service use of aerial support and out-of-area crews to fight the fires, and the conduct of cause and origin investigations into the fires. It is no coincidence that some of these broad themes will be explored in more particular detail during Your Honour's Stage 2 hearings. Some matters within the general brief of evidence will be outlined now, particularly for the benefit of people following the proceedings without access to the written evidence. Turning, if I may, Your Honour, to prevailing weather in the lead-up to and across the bushfire season and what lies ahead. Included within the Stage 2 general brief of evidence is a Bureau of Meteorology and CSIRO State of the Climate Report for 2020. That report found, as at 2020, that 2019 was Australia's warmest year on record. Your Honour, it is instructive to quote some portions of the report directly, and I do so now. There has been an increase in extreme fire weather and in the length of the fire season across large parts of Australia since the 1950s, especially in southern Australia. The frequency of the most dangerous 10% of fire weather days has increased significantly in recent decades across many regions of Australia, especially in the south and east. These increases are particularly evident during spring and summer and are associated with an earlier start to the southern fire weather season. Climate change is contributing to these changes in fire weather, including by affecting temperature, relative humidity, and associated changes to the fuel moisture content. There is a significant trend in some regions of southern Australia towards more days with weather conditions conducive to extreme bushfires that can generate thunderstorms within their smoke plumes. These fire-generated thunderstorms can lead to extremely dangerous fire conditions, as observed during the 2019-20 summer and for the Canberra 2003 and Victorian Black Saturday 2009 fires. In some cases, the lightning strikes produced from the smoke plumes generate new fires. Climate change influences long-term trends in some of the key risk factors for bushfires in Australia. While the influence of climate change on long-term trends is clear, the attribution of a single fire event to climate change is difficult and is the subject of current research. Climate change affects the dryness and amount of fuel through changes in rainfall and air temperature and atmospheric moisture content that exacerbates landscape drying. Furthermore, increased carbon dioxide can also alter the rate and amount of plant growth, which may also affect the fuel load. Increased frequency and intensity of extreme heat as a result of climate change can also worsen extreme fire weather risk. Your Honour, the report also considered the impact of compound extreme events. And I quote, compound extreme events. Climate change influences the frequency, magnitude and impacts of many types of extreme weather and climate events. When extreme weather and climate events occur consecutively within a short time frame of each other, or when multiple types of extreme events coincide, the impacts can compound in severity. For example, heat waves can have a larger impact when combined with the stress of long-term drought. Extreme events are more likely when natural climate variability acts to amplify the background influence of climate change. For example, record-breaking extreme heat and record-breaking fire weather are more likely when the El Niño Southern Oscillation or the Indian Ocean Dipole favour warmer and drier conditions in Australia, since this reinforces warming and drying trends. The spring and early summer of 2019 provides a good example of compounding extreme weather and climate conditions and illustrates the effect of background climate trends amplifying natural climate variability. In this period, record-breaking low rainfall coincided with extreme heat and both continued into early 2020. An extreme positive Indian Ocean dipole and rare Antarctic stratospheric warming in 2019 provided the naturally occurring climate variability that exacerbated long-term climate trends. These combined influences led to severe drought, record-breaking heat waves and fire weather. Natural climate variability, which affects Australia's climate from one year to the next, means that not every year will see weather and climate that was as extreme as in 2019. However, the warming trend, primarily caused by climate change, increases the likelihood of extreme events that are beyond our historical experience. Multiple lines of evidence, including from observations and future climate change projections, point to a continuing trend of more frequent compound extreme events. Projecting the occurrence and severity of extreme events is therefore essential for current and future risk assessments and for climate adaptation strategies and responses. End quotes. The report discussed on new simulations for global climate models and Australia's climate model, Access, and identified that their results are largely consistent with the existing projections for Australia from the CSIRO, Climate Change in Australia website, in addition to adding new insights. The report states that over the coming decades, Australia is projected to experience, quote, a longer fire season for the south and east and an increase in the number of dangerous fire days, end quote, amongst other projections. This evidence is echoed in the findings of the Royal Commission, which addressed compounding disasters as follows, and I quote, natural disasters are expected to become more complex, more unpredictable, and more difficult to manage. We are likely to see more compounding disasters on a national scale with far-reaching consequences. Compounding disasters may be caused by multiple disasters happening simultaneously or one after the other. Some may involve multiple hazards, fires, floods and storms. Some have cascading effects, threatening not only lives and homes, but also the nation's economy, critical infrastructure and essential services, such as our electricity, telecommunications and water supply, and our roads, railways and airports. End quotes. Given this, it is no surprise that recommendations from both the New South Wales and Commonwealth inquiries emphasise that, quote, more trucks and more firefighters are not the answer to the scale of the challenge New South Wales and Australia were confronted with during the 2019-20 bushfire season, end quotes. Each report emphasised that a wide range of matters need to be considered across government and across our society because of this trend for more frequent compound extreme events. Big picture thinking needs to take into account matters such as harnessing developments in technology such as unmanned aircraft and vehicles, to minimise the risk to first responders and improve safety equipment for first responders in the field, improving capabilities for immediate detection of new ignitions, especially in remote areas, and fast responses to keep new fires small. More research into conventional firefighting techniques like backburning or extending the use of nighttime aerial firefighting. More research to develop the ability to predict when fires might escalate at such speed and scale that it is necessary to evacuate the fire ground. Improved telecommunications, which, according to the New South Wales report, quote, varies from improving power backup arrangements to expanding fire information apps to improve firefighting access to radio public safety networks, end quote. In order for these changes to take place, there needs to be more research into fire sciences, such as remote sensing and spatial technology programs, and what the Royal Commission called national research capabilities, with the Bureau of Meteorology, CSIRO, and Geoscience Australia and the Bushfire and Natural Hazards Cooperative Research Centre and its proposed successor. This is not to suggest that research into fire sciences is limited to these organisations. Even a cursory perusal of the Royal Commission report highlights the range of other specialist research hubs working in related fields. Recommendations of this kind from the Commonwealth and state inquiries are of a range that exceeds recommendations that this court might ordinarily make. They are referred to here to illustrate the submission that this court's particular consideration of specific matters sits within a much wider field of inquiry and review that has already taken place. Your Honour, turning, if I may, to lightning strike data. The evidence taken in the Stage 1 coronial inquiries establishes that most of the fires investigated on behalf of Your Honour were caused by lightning strike. This feeds into an observation from the New South Wales report that, quote, this season challenged assumptions about how we fight fires. The scale of the fire stretched the capacity of fire authorities and the underpinning systems to respond, even with interstate and international support. We couldn't get to all new fires early enough, many of which were started by lightning in remote or rugged terrain, and quickly got to the point where suppression was extremely difficult, end quotes. By the second half of 2019, New South Wales had experienced extended periods of drought, resulting in the phenomenon of dry lightning. Dry lightning is a lightning strike with little to no accompanying rain. Whilst the Bureau of Meteorology reported to the New South Wales inquiry on a consensus amongst New South Wales meteorologists that there was not an unusual amount of lightning activity in the season, there may have been more dry lightning strikes due to lower rainfall, which also allowed for easy ignition of fires from lightning. Combined with dry fuels, the effect of dry lightning was catastrophic. Ignitions occurred in areas of bushland so remote that they could only be fought from the air initially, limiting potential options for suppression. It is this combination of circumstances that characterised some of the largest fires of the 2019-2020 bushfire season, in particular the Gospers Mountain Fire, Duns Road Fire, Currawong Fire and the Greenwattle Creek Fire. The origin of these fires could not simply be determined by looking at lightning strike data, especially as lightning strike data only rarely neatly coincided with the reported area of origin for any given fire. Nonetheless, in matter after matter, fire investigators from the Rural Fire Service, from New South Wales Police, and independent expert retained on behalf of this court gave evidence that lightning strike data does not necessarily capture every lightning strike, nor record the location of the strike with complete accuracy. Indeed, evidence varied as to the range of accuracy involved. In these circumstances, the court sought further expert opinion from both the Bureau of Meteorology and an organisation called Metro Weather. In a statement to the court, the Bureau of Meteorology noted that, quote, no lightning network is 100% efficient at detecting lightning strikes. Some strikes can be missed. The density of the sensor network in the region around the thunderstorm is a key factor in determining whether or not lightning is recorded. The Bureau is not aware of any evidence that topography influences the detection efficiency for lightning data supplied to the Bureau. End quotes. Your Honour, this is important because many witnesses told this court that topography might influence detection efficiency. I know two things in this regard. First, the Bureau was here carefully and appropriately confining opinion to the lightning data supplied to the Bureau. At time of writing, the Bureau used data from 2 of the 3 third-party networks covering Australia. Secondly, the court also had a letter from closer in time to the 2019-2020 bushfire season, provided to New South Wales Police from Metro Weather, Australia. According to this account, location accuracy, quote, is affected by terrain roughness, positioning of network sensors in relation to the stroke, the number of sensors that detect each identified stroke, and any distortion of the lightning strike RF signal wave form. End quotes. As a result of the totality of the evidence around lightning strike data, the court would approach the use of the data we submit in this way. Not every lightning strike will be recorded. Not every lightning strike will be recorded accurately in terms of location of the strike. Not every lightning strike will start a fire. Things such as the density of the sensor network, terrain roughness, and possible distortion of the RF signal wave might impact upon location accuracy. And finally, lightning strike data is not enough on its own to establish an area of origin or cause for a fire. It must always be considered in the context of other evidence as to the early reports of fire location, indicators of early fire spread, the outcome of any scene investigation after the fire has passed through, and the presence or absence of other possible ignition sources at the scene. Turning, if I may now, Your Honour, to Stage 2 case studies, the methodology of investigation into bushfire cause and origin. Stage 2 case studies into police and Rural Fire Service bushfire investigation methodology will be heard on 19 and 20 September in relation firstly to the Kriwa cluster of fires. And I'll just have that cluster displayed now, Your Honour. Your Honour will recall the Kriwa cluster of fires comprise 3 related fires: the Kriwa Road, Postman's Trail and Big Jack Mountain fires, which are displayed on this map before Your Honour. Detective Chief Inspector Adam Perfett will give evidence at this hearing. Detective Chief Inspector Perfett leads the arson unit within the Financial Crime Squad State Crime Command of New South Wales. The hearing will address the guidance that was given to New South Wales police officers statewide by the arson unit as to the nature and scope of investigation into fires that were to be undertaken across the 2019-2020 bushfire season, the circumstances in which New South Wales police officers were required to report fires, to Your Honour, across the 2019-2020 bushfire season, the process of allocating and pursuing police investigations into fires that crossed local government areas, police districts and/or police area command boundaries, information sharing between New South Wales Police and the Rural Fire Service as to naming conventions for bushfires and access to ICON records once fires merge. ICON means Incident Control Online, a computerised record system used by the Rural Fire Service. And finally, whether recommendations are desirable to ensure greater collaboration between New South Wales Police and the Rural Fire Service in the course of New South Wales Police undertaking bushfire cause and origin investigations. Next, the approach of the Rural Fire Service to the investigation of bushfires will be examined, drawing on the Rural Fire Service's investigations into the Mount Mckenzie Road fire at Tenterfield and the Gross Valley fire at Mount Wilson. Your Honour has before Your Honour on the screen a photograph taken from the Gross Valley brief at page 967. The hearing will focus on, first, the purpose behind Rural Fire Service fire investigations and the authority to conduct such investigations, including investigations into the cause and origin of a fire, fire scene investigations of the point at which a fire is believed to have crossed from one local government area boundary into another, or from an area subject to a Section 44 declaration to another. As Your Honour knows, a Section 44 declaration is one made by the Commissioner of the Rural Fire Service under the Bushfires Act, which has the effect of giving responsibility for fighting a fire to the Rural Fire Service. Next, any fire investigation required when a fire is thought to be an extension of another fire, though annexed and managed as a separate incident in ICON, and the process for determining which type of investigation will be carried out. Secondly, the process for conducting a cause and origin investigation requested by New South Wales Police, including the process for determining when a fire investigation instead of a cause and origin investigation will be undertaken, the process for communicating when a requested cause and origin investigation cannot be complied with, whether in whole or in part, and if reasons should be provided, and finally the process that applies when it is agreed a joint investigation will be undertaken between the Rural Fire Service and New South Wales Police. Thirdly, the training and qualifications of Rural Fire Service authorised fire investigators, including the qualifications and experience required to be a fire investigator, the training, including refresher training provided to fire investigators, whether a fire investigator should set out in a cause and an origin investigation report any reasonable hypothesis as to cause and origin, including evidence both for and against that hypothesis, the communications that should occur between the fire investigator and New South Wales Police or other relevant party about seizing physical exhibits and or undertaking further investigations that the fire investigator reasonably believes are necessary in order to determine cause and origin. Whether a fire investigator should include in a cause and origin investigation report detail of relevant discussions with other people at a fire investigation scene, where such discussions might include information that supports or detracts from a hypothesis about cause and origin, and the steps a fire investigator should take after having prepared a cause and origin investigation report if they receive information that causes them to change the views expressed in that report. Fourthly, allocation of fire investigators to particular matters, including the process for allocating a fire investigator to investigate a particular fire, whether a fire investigator has discretion to vary the scope of the investigation or request changes to the scope of the investigation if preliminary investigations suggest this is warranted. And fifthly, are recommendations desirable to ensure greater collaboration between New South Wales Police and the Rural Fire Service in the course of New South Wales Police undertaking bushfire cause and origin investigations? Turning, if I may, Your Honour, to Stage 2 case study, communications and warnings. This topic has been considered by both the State Inquiry and Commonwealth Royal Commission. It will also be considered by Your Honour on 21 September in the context of the Stage 2 General Inquiry into the Kangawalla Die Hard Fire. This hearing will proceed in light of recent changes to the Australian Fire Danger Rating System since the early inquiry is concluded. This is a system that we might be familiar with, even if we don't necessarily understand it in any great detail. We might be familiar with the system because we recognise the roadside signs with a colour-coded semicircle and an arrow pointing to a particular fire risk for the day, formerly 6 levels of risk in New South Wales, but now reduced to 4. We might not really understand the system, though, because what are we meant to do if the sign tells us today's rating is extreme versus, say, catastrophic? This was explored by the Royal Commission, who noted individuals struggle with identifying what action they should take in response to each rating, particularly in the middle of the system. Perhaps the reduced number of risk categories and a newly consistent national approach will lead to a clearer understanding of how we might modify our own behaviour in light of fire danger ratings. In terms of the bushfire warning system, different to the Australian fire danger rating system, the Royal Commission made similar observations about the 3 levels of alert being advice, watch and act, and emergency warning, and what people might be expected to do in response. This led, Your Honour, to recommendations that state and territory governments urgently deliver and implement the all-hazard Australian warning system, accompanied by an educational campaign. Whilst the watch and act level remains in use, the Australian warning system was adopted in the first quarter of last year. Turning to the emergency alert system, which can send out voice messages and text messages and the like, the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry gave particular attention to the effect of communication outages during the 2019-2020 bushfire season. It found, and I quote, "The 2019-20 fires caused significant fire damage to power infrastructure, with damage to poles, pole-mounted substation sites, and hundreds of kilometres of overhead high-voltage power lines. This resulted in thousands of customers experiencing power outages throughout the bushfire season. The biggest consequence of power outages was the loss of communications, as most telecommunication towers are connected to electricity by transmission lines. The large-scale loss of communications limited people's ability to know whether they were directly threatened by fire, people's ability to make decisions about preparing their properties, whether to evacuate, and evacuation options, such as knowing the safest evacuation route and which roads are open, and being able to get and pay for essential supplies such as fuel to evacuate, adding the potential for panic, anxiety and distress to an already stressful situation. Firefighting efforts, for example, operation centres losing contact with firefighting teams on the ground, outages to operation centres, and distribution of warnings to the public. These problems were also noted by the Royal Commission. Its report quoted one resident as stating, quote, "When the internet and power failed, we had no means of communicating with the outside world, nor could we receive information on the status of the fires. There was scant information available on the commercial station, and the information was, at times, frivolous and not relevant to our specific area. End quotes. In terms of outages, the New South Wales inquiry recommended certain steps to minimise communication outages and extend basic communication coverage during bushfires. These included ensuring sufficient redundancy options exist, such as backup generators and temporary facilities, to supply power to essential or alternative to telecommunications structures. The upgrading of network providers' bushfire risk management plans on an annual basis. Auditing of telecommunications distributors' preparedness for bushfire risk. Facilitating cross-carrier roaming arrangements in areas affected by fire for basic texts, calls and data, and enabling the Rural Fire Service to require telecommunication carriers to provide regular information on the status of outages and areas affected by fires. Those steps are still in the process of being implemented in conjunction with providers. Parallel to this, the Commonwealth, in response to similar recommendations made by the Royal Commission in relation to critical infrastructure, has allocated funds to purchase portable communication facilities that can be positioned in bushfire-affected areas to allow the restoration of communication services quickly, deploy satellite services at Rural Fire Service depots and evacuation centres, and provide grants to service providers to improve the resilience of mobile infrastructure, including $12 million to Optus, Telstra and TPG to extend battery backups for mobile base stations. Against this backdrop, Your Honour will inquire into communications and emergency warnings during the Kangarwalla Die Hard fire. In extreme weather conditions, on 8 November 2019, the fire, which had previously been thought to have been contained, rapidly intensified and moved to the east. Within a matter of hours, the fire had engulfed part of the Waitalaba commune, causing the deaths of Vivian Chaplin and George Knoll. Evidence within the brief suggests that the residents of Waitalaba received little to no warning that the fire was rapidly bearing down upon them. Using this fire as a case study, Your Honour will consider the following issues. The process for issuing emergency alerts, including the process for deciding when a telephone-based emergency alert is issued, the process for defining the geographic reach of an emergency alert, and the additional steps required for areas with poor mobile reception, black spots and/or where there is no telecommunication coverage. The adequacy of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service communications and emergency warning systems on 8 November 2019 in respect of the Kangarwalla fire and its likely impact on the community of Waitalaba. The adequacy of Rural Fire Service communication systems between ground crews in the field, including with respect to black spot areas and/or network failures and contingency planning for operation continuity, the adequacy of RFS communication systems between ground crews and fire control centres or other operational command areas, including with respect to black spots and/or network failures and contingency planning for operational continuity. Coming, if I may, Your Honour, to Stage 2 case study, Bushfire Risk Classification. This case study is to be considered, will focus on Essential Energy's approach to bushfire risk classification having regard to the Falford Road Darrawang fire. Your Honour will recall that that fire was caused by at least one branch falling onto power lines. This resulted in arcing, which emitted embers onto dry foliage, igniting a fire that went on to burn 3,000 hectares. Essential Energy's classification of bushfire risk severity zones directly informs its vegetation management program, which seeks to reduce the risk of such events arising from the electrical infrastructure that it owns and operates across the state. Your Honour will consider the appropriateness of Essential Energy's bushfire risk classification approach, including underpinning modelling, in the lead-up to preparing for the 2019-2020 bushfire season, and as currently applied. Turning now to case study fire prediction modelling. This is an area of complex science and of huge importance to the way in which future fire seasons will be approached. The case study will proceed in 2023 by reference to a number of fires Your Honour has already considered as part of Your Honour's Stage 1 hearings. In terms of fire prediction, the New South Wales inquiry stated that it, and I quote, was impressed with how New South Wales RFS worked at great speed to use quite a diverse array of remote sensing imagery and information to infer the characteristics of the big fires in the 2019-20 season. But the inquiry and several of the remote sensing agencies and companies it consulted were surprised that more sophisticated data fusion and automatic decision-making tools were not available to assist New South Wales RFS with this task, given Australia's capabilities in this field. End quotes. It was the inquiry's view that those tools, and I quote, can be very helpful in bringing together data, especially partial and dirty data from many disparate sources to form a more comprehensive, reliable and always-on total picture of fires across the state. And from such a comprehensive picture, needed features, example, fire edge and its speed of change, fire spread, temperature, etc., can be extracted continuously using artificial intelligence, more specifically picture processing techniques, another area where Australia has strong capability. End quotes. The New South Wales inquiry recommended that, and I quote, in order to improve capability to detect ignitions and monitor accurately all fire edge intensity and progression automatically across the state in near real time, government established a spatial technology acceleration program to maximise the information available from the various remote sensing technologies currently in use and to plan for inclusion of new remote sensing systems that can sense precisely and rapidly through heavy smoke, cloud, fog and dust. This will require work within the state and with partners nationally and internationally. The New South Wales Rural Fire Service has taken steps to implement this recommendation. The latest progress report from March of this year records that the RFS had configured new aircraft for early detection. Some systems were still being tested and the RFS was working to participate with Forestry Corporation trials of early fire and smoke detection systems. Pursuant to a further recommendation from the New South Wales inquiry, the RFS has also taken steps to recruit additional fire behaviour analysts so that each area command has sufficient expertise. These steps and any further progress made by the RFS will no doubt become relevant when Your Honour considers issues relating to fire prediction in the course of hearings early next year. Coming, if I may, Your Honour, to Stage 2 case studies, vehicle design and safety. In 2023, a case study hearing will be conducted into the Green Valley Fire Talmalmo, Green Wattle Creek Fire, Lake Burragarang and the Keaton Road Fire South Arm, focusing upon the safety of firefighting vehicles, particularly highlighted by the tragic deaths of Jeffrey Keaton, Andrew O'Dwyer and Samuel McCall. The safety of those within the RFS who volunteered to risk their lives to protect their communities was the focus of several recommendations of the New South Wales inquiry. Those recommendations included fitting all light tankers with a single point crew protection safety spray system and radiant heat protection, fitting all medium and heavy tankers with radiant heat protection blankets, wheel and halo sprays. Your Honour, both of those recommendations are being implemented by the RFS. Between January of 2021 and the end of March 2022, New South Wales Inquiry Recommendation 71 had compliant light tankers, and 128 compliant medium heavy tankers were constructed and delivered to RFS brigades. And in response to New South Wales Inquiry Recommendation 51, I withdraw that, 51 existing heavy tankers had been retrofitted. Further research into cabin protection is also still in progress with the Monash University Accident Research Centre and will be explored during these hearings. Turning now to Stage 2 case studies, decision-making around strategic backburns. This will be explored in 2023 in the context of the Grosse Valley Fire and the Coronial Fire. For present purposes, I note the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry. And I quote, found that even despite appropriate planning, risk analysis and precautions, there were still times when approved backburns breached containment lines and caused damage or loss to property. This was often due to unforeseen extreme weather conditions, which were a feature of the 2019-20 season. While these backburns may have ultimately been successful in preventing more widespread damage from occurring, this does not console those who lose property as a result, end quotes. The inquiry recommended that given the heightened risk presented by backburning in severe, extreme or catastrophic conditions, an independent review must be undertaken at the level of RFS state operations before strategic backburns are implemented. That recommendation has been implemented along with protocols established for tactical and strategic backburning that draw on the lessons from the 2019-2020 fire season. Turning now to coronial inquests still to be conducted. Your Honour will conduct an inquest into the deaths of Paul Hudson, Ian Macbeth and Rick De Morgan Jr. in the week commencing Monday, 20 March 2023. These are, of course, the three American firefighters who died while performing aerial firefighting support during the Good Fire in January 2020 at Peak View. An Australian Transport Safety Bureau report, ATSB, report into the crash has only recently been released, and it will prompt a series of further investigations undertaken by the officer in charge of the coronial investigation prior to the matters being heard in 2023. Your Honour, these submissions have set out a general plan for the way forward. A number of matters will conclude across the next 2 weeks. Others will proceed to further hearing later this month and still more in 2023. Before moving on to the first matters listed today, those assisting Your Honour express gratitude to the New South Wales government agencies who have spent days investigating the bushfires and deaths resulting from the 2019-20 bushfire season, including New South Wales Police, New South Wales Rural Fire Service and New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service in particular. Whilst Your Honour's coronial proceedings have focused on a select number of major bushfires from amongst the staggering 11,774 fires that reportedly burnt, New South Wales Police and New South Wales Rural Fire staff, many of them volunteers, investigated many more. This, of course, occurred alongside their other responsibilities, whether active firefighting work or the protection of people and property. Your Honour, the community owes them a debt of gratitude. Your Honour, that concludes my opening remarks. If it's convenient to Your Honour, I tender a 9-volume general brief of evidence which I'm instructed ought to be marked Exhibit 61.
Yes, thank you, Mr Castleton. Exhibit 61.
I note the time, and before Your Honour rises, a draft short minute of order with respect to non-publication and a further timetable for brief service has been circulated to parties with leave, and it is anticipated to be finalised this Wednesday, 7 September, during the directions hearing, which I understand has been scheduled for 10 a.m.
Thank you, Mr Castleton. We'll take the morning adjournment and we'll resume at 12:10.
May it please the Court.
Questions, Mr Castleton?
Thank you, Your Honour. I come now to address Your Honour in relation to the inquiry into the fire at Duns Road and East Ernie Creek, together with the inquest into the death of David Harrison. Appearing with me is Mr Harker in relation to those three matters. Your Honour, the Duns Road fire burned for approximately 7 weeks in the Snowy Valleys local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo people. Your Honour has heard that a lightning strike on the late evening of 27 December 2019 started that fire. Investigating police identified 2 significant lightning strikes that night, one at 11:50 p.m. and the other at 11:55 p.m. I'll just have now displayed on the screen a Google satellite image showing markers of location of a forestry plantation and the relevant national park. The fire originated within a private pine plantation known as Toxicology near Adelong in the Snowy Valleys local government area. The property is in the Ellerslie Range, approximately 1.5 kilometres to the east of the O'Byrne-Ellerslie Fire Trail. The East Ernie Creek Fire, Ellerslie Range, also burned in the Snowy Valleys local government area, also encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo people. During Your Honour's inquiry, Your Honour heard how the fire was also caused by a lightning strike. However, this strike was in the afternoon of 31 December 2019 in the Bogandera National Park. This fire was one of very many fires across the state of New South Wales in the 2019-2020 bushfire season. Not all fires were reported to Your Honour. Not all fires reported to Your Honour proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin. Not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into the cause and origin will continue to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of Stage 2 of Your Honour's proceedings. It is submitted that it is not necessary for the Duns Road or East Ernie Creek fires to proceed to further investigation via a general inquiry. Can I just come now, Your Honour, to the chronology of events for these 2 fires. On 27 December 2019, a fire was reported in a private plantation, as I said earlier, as Takajo near Adelong in the Snowy Valleys local government area. The area of origin was on privately owned pine plantation in the Ellerslie Range, owned by Snowy Mountains Forestry and operated by Hume Forests Limited. The area of origin not being the plantation itself, but in an area of retained native vegetation consisting of red stringy bark, red box and long leaf box forest. On this day, that is 27 December 2019, Bruce Angel, a Rural Fire Service member and captain of the Tarcutta Brigade at the time, saw a storm pass over the Ellerslie Ranges. At 12 p.m. the next day, that is 28 December 2019, Mr Angel and his wife saw a column of smoke rising from the northeast in the Ellerslie Ranges. Mr Angel took a photograph of the smoke and then called the RFS and 000. And I'll just have that photograph displayed now for Your Honour's benefit. On the same day, another witness, Stuart Burbridge, who was also a local resident and member of the RFS, was informed by his wife of smoke coming from the Ellerslie Ranges. Mr Burbridge also called 000. Mr Angel and Mr Burbridge independently attended the location of the fire in their respective RFS vehicles. Mr Angel said that he saw fire burning in the area of the pine plantation on the eastern side of the range, with the fire travelling in a southerly direction. Mr Burbridge drove to the O'Byrne Creek RFS shed, caught his crew and drove to the Ellerslie Range, where he estimated that the burnt area was approximately 3 to 4 kilometres. It was estimated by Mr Burbridge that the fire on the western side had flames reaching 50 metres high. And I'll just have played now, Your Honour, a video that Mr Burbridge took. By 6:30 p.m. on 28 December 2019, There were 21 RFS appliances, 6 National Parks and Wildlife Services appliances, and 5 Fire and Rescue New South Wales appliances at the fire scene. There was also 2 fixed-wing water bombing aircrafts allocated to the fire that afternoon. 2 days later, on 30 December 2019, the Duns Road fire spread over 19 kilometres in one day. On 31 December 2019, a significant storm with lightning impacted the area surrounding Duns Road. On this day, a fire commenced in the Bogandera Nature Reserve. Evidence heard during the inquiry indicates that the fire, known as the East Ernie Creek Fire, was first observed by Rebecca Clark, a resident of a property at the end of East Ernie Road. She said that at about lunchtime that day, she heard a loud clap of thunder and saw 2 lightning strikes before smoke began to rise from those 2 locations. The officer in charge of the investigation into the Duns Road and East Ernie fires, Detective Senior Constable Alexander, told the court that he first attended the fire scene on 1 January 2020. He described the area of origin as very difficult to attend due to the steep terrain and the large amount of fallen trees. He was tasked with investigating the Duns Road fire about a week later. RFS fire regression mapping and oral evidence provided by the officer in charge suggests that the fire made a significant run on 31 December 2019 to 1 January 2020, spreading, as I said earlier, 19 kilometres on one day and approximately 80 kilometres in a southwesterly direction on the other. And I'll just have displayed now, Your Honour, a fire progression map for those 2 particular days being 30 and 31 December. And the next one Your Honour now sees is an RFS fire progression map for 31 December to 1 January 2020. The officer in charge identified this as an extraordinarily extreme anomalous behaviour and difficult to prepare for. The fire continued to spread over the following days, with RFS efforts remaining focused on the Duns Road fire. On 4 January 2020, the Duns Road and East Ernie Creek fires, along with the Doubtful Gap Trail, Adaminity Complex and Green Valley fires, made significant runs in a southeast and later northeast direction. It is noted that tragically, this is the date that David Harrison died in connection with the Duns Road fire. The findings in relation to the inquest into his death will be made shortly. On 5 January 2020, the East Ernie Creek fire merged with the Green Valley fire to the west, then merged with the Duns Road fire on 10 January 2020. The Duns Road fire continued to burn until it was declared out on 16 February 2020. During the inquiry, Your Honour heard that the Duns Road fire ultimately burnt over 334,000 hectares of land and destroyed or damaged at least 1,024 structures, including the Selwyn Snow Resort and many homes in Batlow, Cunama, Tumbarumba, Ondalga and Yaven Creek. The inquiry heard that the East Ernie Creek fire burned for approximately 2 weeks, burnt an area of approximately 407 hectares and damaged or destroyed at least 1 home. Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of evidence which includes statements from members of the New South Wales Police Force, New South Wales RFS, National Parks and Wildlife Service and representatives of Hume Forest Limited. That body of evidence also includes a fire investigation report and various documents from the RFS. Your Honour also received into evidence a further volume of evidence comprising photographs and videos for the far southern region of fires, which includes one video relating to the Duns Road and East Ernie Creek fires, as well as a general brief relating more broadly to the southern region of New South Wales. The officer in charge, Detective Senior Constable Peter Alexander, Detective Sergeant Sean Clark, and RFS Fire Investigator Scott Conlon each gave oral evidence on 20 and 21 September 2021, respectively. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquiry concerning a fire is required to make findings as to the date and place of the fire and the circumstances of that fire. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future arising out of that fire. In this inquiry, the focus was on identifying where and when the Duns Road and the East Ernie Creek fire originated and the cause of the fires. Turning, if I may, Your Honour, to key conclusions. Firstly, in relation to Duns Road fire. On around 30 January 2020, Detective Sergeant Sean Clark from the Crime Scene Unit of New South Wales Police and RFS Fire Investigator John Baker attended the scene of the suspected area of origin of the Duns Road fire. Detective Sergeant Clark has provided statements and oral evidence to the court that the area of origin was rugged terrain, with the point of origin being in rough country and was hazardous to traverse. It was his conclusion that the area of origin was in the Ellerslie State Forest, with part of the area being occupied by pine plantation and privately owned by the Hume Forest Limited. In addition to attending the area of origin, Detective Sergeant Clark reviewed lightning strike data and collated information from a number of witnesses. He provided evidence in relation to 2 lightning strikes that were recorded on 27 December 2019 at 11:50pm and 11:55pm. It is his evidence that Mr. Angel and Mr. Burbridge's observations and information received from first responders of lightning in this area were consistent with the lightning data. The court has heard from Detective Sergeant Clark that he identified vegetation that appeared impacted by lightning strike. He says that he found evidence of leaf freeze in a west to east direction and a tree with parallel marks in the trunk and protruding sap, which is consistent with sap boiling from lightning impact in relation to the Duns Road fire. His evidence concluded that the origin of the Duns Road fire was a particular tree west of Mount Pleasant Creek in Ellerslie. He opines that the GPS coordinates of that impacted tree was consistent with the location of the lightning strike recorded at around 11:50pm. Mr. Simon Conlon, an authorised fire investigator with the RFS, provided a report and oral evidence to the court which reached similar conclusions to Detective Sergeant Clark. Originally, Mr. Conlon relied upon the information provided by Mr. Angel, the first arriving responder, and Mr. Burbridge to identify the general area of the fire and lightning activity that occurred that evening. Mr. Conlon attended the fire scene on or around 24 January 2020 and described the terrain as very steep and rugged, with the area of origin being inaccessible by any other means other than foot. His evidence concluded that the area of origin of the Duns Road fire was in the Ellerslie Ranges, located east of the O'Byrne-Ellerslie Trail. Mr. Conlon provided evidence relating to 3 significant lightning strikes and a particular tree impacted by lightning. I'll just have displayed from page 75 and also 77 a photograph from his evidence, Csiro. You want to see there that the tree had sap expelled or pushed out from the tree as it had been struck by lightning. He concluded that based on the lightning strike data and his physical examination of the general area, he was able to exclude other possible causes of the fire, he concluded that the fire was caused by a lightning strike at about 11:50 p.m. on 27 December 2019. Turning now, Your Honour, to East Ernie Creek. In respect of the East Ernie Creek fire, the officer in charge of the investigation concluded that the East Ernie Creek fire was caused by a lightning strike that ignited an area in the Burgundera National Park on 31 December 2019. Detective Sergeant Clark from the Crime Scene Unit attended the Burgundera National Park on 26 February 2020 with the officer in charge. They attended the location in close proximity to a lightning strike recorded in the area at around 3:05 p.m. on 31 December 2019. Unlike his investigation into the Duns Road fire, Detective Sergeant Clark was unable to find macro or micro fire indicators to identify a specific area of origin. However, he was able to identify an area of origin through obtaining and reviewing information from a number of witnesses, including Craig Clothier, Rebecca Clark and Michael Greenhow. Those witnesses first observed lightning strikes in the Burgundera National Nature Reserve on the afternoon of 31 December and columns of smoke in the same vicinity soon after those strikes. Detective Sergeant Clark was able to eliminate a number of other potential causes and provided evidence to the court that the East Ernie Creek fire was caused by a lightning strike. He concluded that the fire originated within the Burgundera Nature Reserve and within proximity to one of the 3 lightning strikes recorded on GPATs in the afternoon of 31 December 2019. Your Honour, it is submitted that the area of origin of the Duns Road fire was in a privately owned pine plantation known as Takajo near Adelong in the Ellerslie Ranges, approximately 1.5 kilometres east of O'Byrne Ellerslie Fire Trail. The cause of the Duns Road fire, we submit, was a lightning strike on 27 December 2019 at approximately 11:50 p.m. We further submit, Your Honour, that the area of origin of the East Ernie Creek fire was in an area proximate to the Burgundera Nature Reserve in East Ernie, approximately 18 kilometres south to southeast of the township of Tumbarumba. We submit the cause of the East Ernie Creek fire was a lightning strike on 31 December 2019 at approximately 3:05 p.m. Before concluding, Your Honour, can I say, on behalf of those assisting, Your Honour, that we'd like to express our gratitude to those who have aided and provided information to Your Honour to assist with the Coronial inquiry into Duns Road and East Ernie Creek fires. Your Honour, that concludes our oral address in relation to those 2 fires. If it's convenient to Your Honour, can I now address Your Honour in relation to the inquest into the death of David Harrison?
Thank you.
As Your Honour will recall, Mr. David Harrison was 47 years old when he died at approximately 7:25 p.m. on 4 January 2022 in the vicinity of Batload Road, Wandalga. He was located unconscious shortly after defending his friend's property from the Duns Road fire. On 4 January 2020, under extreme fire weather conditions, the Duns Road fire made a significant progression and impacted properties in Wandalga, including the property known as Strathvale, owned by Jeff Purcell. The evidence demonstrates that the temperature on 4 January 2020 was extremely hot, over and above 40 degrees Celsius, with a significant heavy smoke in the air. As identified at autopsy, Mr. Harrison's elevated post-mortem methamphetamine level and the significant increased environmental temperatures present at the time of his death likely combined to cause his death. The property owned by Jeff Purcell at 5000 Batlow Road on Dalga included a main residence, a couple of sheds, cattle yards and machinery. Mr Harrison attended his friend Mr Purcell's property regularly. On 29 December 2019, Mr Purcell reported that he noticed embers, or rather burnt leaves and ashes on the ground of his property, which he had assumed had blown over from the Duns Road fire. The next day, 30 December 2019, Mr Harrison arrived at the property. Mr Purcell said that both men monitored the spread of the fires, with Mr Purcell seeing the glow of the fire approximately 20 kilometres away. I'll just have displayed now a photograph Mr Purcell took. He estimated at this time that the fire was heading in a southerly direction. On 31 December 2019, Mr Purcell said that he received a message from the RFS advising residents around Tumbarumba and surrounds to seek shelter as the fire arrives. Mr Purcell said that he and Mr Harrison discussed the threat of the fire and decided to stay and fight it. It was Mr Purcell's view that the fire may had already passed in a southerly direction and wasn't a threat at this point in time. On this day, Mr Harrison assisted Mr Purcell to prepare the house, livestock and sheds for any approaching fire. They verbally devised a plan should the fire impact the property and continued to monitor the weather, wind and fire conditions. The property had a 1,000 litre firefighting unit on a trailer, a 6,000 litre tank and a pump on a truck and a 600 litre firefighting unit on a Land Cruiser. On 1 January 2020, the fire had travelled closer to Mr Purcell's property, with the surroundings appearing smoky. Your Honour will see a further photograph taken by Mr Purcell on New Year's Day 2020. On the 2nd of January 2020, Mr Harrison assisted Mr Purcell's mother to leave the property due to the increasing concern about the fire. At around 2:40 p.m. and 3 p.m, the New South Wales RFS messaged Mr Purcell advising Batlow and Wandalga residents to leave immediately. Mr Harrison and Mr Purcell attended Tumut to get supplies such as food, water and fuel and monitored the fire overnight. On 3 January 2020, Mr Harrison and Mr Purcell continued to prepare and protect the property, including mustering cattle, communicating with neighbours and listening to the radio. Their surroundings were smoky, as Your Honour will see in this next photograph, and a message was received by Mr Purcell at around 5:12 p.m. from the New South Wales RFS requesting that Batlow and Wandalga residents seek shelter immediately. On this day, that is the 3rd of January 2020, Mr Harrison was in regular contact with family members and friends. A neighbour, Phil Hodges, said that he drove to the property and spoke with both Mr Harrison and Mr Purcell. He said both men were aware of the approaching fire and planned to protect Mr Purcell's property. In oral evidence, Mr Purcell said he estimated that the fire remained a fair distance away, probably around 15 kilometres away from the property at this time. At around 1 p.m. on 4 January 2020, the Purcell property lost power. Mr Harrison and Mr Purcell prepared their water tank in the cattle yards and observed the fire approaching from the south. Mr Purcell recalls that the conditions were extremely hot and never cooling down with strong winds. During the afternoon, Mr Purcell said that he and Mr Harrison went over their fire plan, noting where all the equipment was and familiarising themselves with the evacuation plan as well. At around 3:16 p.m, Mr Harrison received an SMS message from the New South Wales RFS notifying him of the approaching fire. I just have played now, Your Honour, a video taken from from the relevant area. At about 3:54 p.m, Mr. Purcell took this video as the fire approached from the south. Mr. Harrison is shown at the end of the video.
Oh, way up.
Mr. Harrison there. At about 4:10 p.m, again on the 4th of January 2020, the fire jumped Batlow Road and into Mr. Purcell's property. And you'll all see a further photograph taken by Mr. Purcell at about that time. It's found at page 69 of the brief of evidence. Mr. Purcell said that the fire created even more of a storm at this point. At around 4:15 p.m, as the fire approached the property, he and Mr. Harrison decided to evacuate, got into their car and drove in a westerly direction towards the front gate of the property. However, on the way they saw the cattle yards and hay shed on fire and decided to attempt to save them. They remained on the property for at least another hour. Mr. Purcell says he tried to save the hay shed and then returned to the main house. He located Mr. Harrison sitting on a step near the water tank, looking visibly exhausted, and they drank some water together. Mr. Purcell then returned to the hay sheds, assuming that Mr. Harrison had refilled the water tank. Mr. Purcell described to the court that at this point in time, the temperature was the hottest he had ever probably felt, and that the oxygen was taken out of the air. He described struggling to breathe. At around 6:40 p.m, Mr. Purcell indicated that he realised that the water tank had not been refilled and returned to the main house. He discovered Mr. Harrison sitting in the front passenger seat of the Land Cruiser, unconscious. Mr. Purcell entered the Land Cruiser and drove with Mr. Harrison towards Tumut. At 6:53 p.m, Mr. Purcell called 000 after obtaining mobile phone reception. He flagged down a New South Wales police vehicle with two officers, Senior Constable Crislow and Senior Constable Zickel, heading for Batlow. Senior Constable Crislow commenced CPR on Mr. Harrison while Senior Constable Zickel attempted to get radio reception and call an ambulance. Both officers have provided statements to this effect. Ms. Ellen Cromer from the New South Wales Forestry Corporation has also provided a statement to the court detailing how she was driving towards Wandalga on Batlow Road and came across a white Land Cruiser ute parked facing downhill, a police car and forestry ute with 4 people and a man on the ground. Her colleague, Anthony Post, exited the vehicle to render assistance with a defibrillator. At around 7:15 p.m, an ambulance arrived on scene and paramedics made attempts to resuscitate Mr. Harrison. He was then transported to Tumut Hospital by ambulance and tragically pronounced deceased at about 7:25 p.m. Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of material which includes statements from members of the New South Wales Police Force, New South Wales Forestry Corporation, New South Wales Ambulance, as well as civilian witnesses. That material also includes police investigator notes and medical records of Mr. Harrison. The court also has received a volume of evidence in relation to the Duns Road and East Ernie Creek fires. The court has also received into evidence a further volume of evidence comprising photographs and videos for the far southern region of fires, which included one video relating to the death of Mr. Harrison, which Your Honour has just seen, as well as a general brief of evidence relating more broadly to the southern region of New South Wales. The officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Senior Constable Peter Alexander, and Mr Harrison's neighbour and friend, Jeff Purcell, gave oral evidence on 20 and 21 September last year. Mr Harrison's brother, Peter Harrison, also provided a family statement. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquest concerning the death of a person is required to make findings as to the identity of the person who died, when and where they died, and the manner and cause of death. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future, arising out of the death in question. In this inquest, Mr Harrison's identity is known, as is the date and place of his death. For this reason, the inquest into Mr Harrison's death focused on the manner and cause of his death. Coming now to our key submissions. Intensive care paramedic Lynette Richards provided a statement to the court detailing her dispatchment on 4 January 2020 to a location halfway up Batlow Road, just before the Wandalga Road, Wandalga. At the scene, New South Wales Police were performing CPR on Mr Harrison, including the use of a defibrillator. Paramedics removed the defibrillator pads and instead used LifePak 15 defibrillation pads on Mr Harrison. Ms Richards observed Mr Harrison cyanosed in astoly with no electrical activity in the heart, no signs of breathing with dilated pupils. Ms Richards conducted bag mask resuscitation, put an intubation tube into Mr Harrison's airways and attempted to clear his airways with a suction tube. Resuscitation was ceased as there was no sign of life and no response to CPR. The post-mortem toxicology analysis identified methamphetamine and its metabolite amphetamine significantly elevated in Mr Harrison's blood. It was also revealed that low levels of alcohol and non-toxic marijuana metabolites and carbon monoxide were also detected. The autopsy report also noted that elevated temperatures in the vicinity of Mr Harrison's death, noting that the temperatures reported by the Bureau of Meteorology on 4 January 2020 exceeded 40 degrees Celsius. A body temperature at the scene was not recorded. However, a diagnosis of hyperthermia or heat stroke was identified as possible given the circumstances of Mr Harrison's death. In our submission, Your Honour, noting the above, no recommendations are warranted. The pathologist at autopsy concluded that Mr Harrison's cause of death was best described as combined effects of methamphetamine use and hypothermia. Noting that methamphetamine was present in post-mortem samples, the forensic pathologist stated that acute methamphetamine intoxication is believed to induce a dose-dependent brain and body hypothermia, which is strongly potentiated by associated physiological activation and in warm environments that prevent proper heat dissipation to the external environment. We submit that this should be recorded as the cause of death for Mr Harrison because it encapsulates both causative factors. Mr Harrison died from the combination of methamphetamine use and hypothermia shortly after defending his friend's property from the Duns Road fire. Accordingly, in our submission, Your Honour would make the following findings under Section 81 of the Coroners Act: that David Harrison died on 4 January 2020 at approximately 7:25 p.m. at Batlow Road, Wandalga, shortly after defending his friend's property from the Duns Road fire. The likely cause of death was a combination of methamphetamine use and hypothermia. Those assisting the court wish to acknowledge and commend the urgent roadside first aid assistance rendered to Mr Harrison by Jeff Purcell, Senior Constable Crislow, Senior Constable Zickel, Anthony Post, Ellen Cromer and the New South Wales Ambulance paramedics. Those assisting the court expressed their gratitude to Mr Harrison's family and his close friend Jeff Purcell for their willingness to participate and assist with the coronial investigation into the death of David Harrison. As noted by his close friend Mr. Purcell, Mr. Harrison was a hero for helping Mr. Purcell defend his property under extreme conditions. The council assisting team again expressed their condolences to the extended Harrison family, particularly his three older brothers, Michael, Peter and Warren, and all of Mr. Harrison's friends and loved ones for their loss. May it please Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Castleton.
Your Honour, could I turn, if it's appropriate, to the final matter listed for oral address today, which is the inquiry into the Wattle State Forest Kumbaja fire. I appear in that matter together with my learned friend Mr. Harker. Your Honour, the Wattle State Forest Kumbaja, referred to throughout the inquiry as the Wattle 2 fire, burned in the Clarence Valley local government area on the lands of the Bunjalung and the Gumanbayinji and Narrabul people. Evidence during the inquiry suggests that there were complexities associated with identifying the cause of the Wattle 2 fire, and to understand the cause of the fire, it was necessary to look back to the months leading up to its likely ignition. In this case, there were 3 smaller fires that burned within the same area and prior to the Wattle 2 fire. It is noted that sometime after the 4 fires, Senior Constable Drew from the New South Wales Police Forensic Evidence and Technical Services Command, or FETS, conducted investigations into the cause and origin of each of the fires and was assisted by New South Wales Rural Fire Services fire investigator Mark Fulliger. Mr. Fulliger attended with Senior Constable Drew in an assisting capacity at the request of the officer in charge of the investigation, Senior Constable Travis Ware. He did not conduct his own fire investigation. This fire was one of very many fires across the state of New South Wales in the 2019-2020 bushfire season. As I've said previously, not all fires were reported to Your Honour. Not all fires reported to Your Honour proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin. Not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into the cause and origin will continue to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of Stage 2 of Your Honour's proceedings. It is submitted that it is not necessary for the Wattle State Forest Kumbaja fire to proceed further by way of general inquiry. Coming now, if I may, Your Honour, to the chronology of events, the evidence has detailed the circumstances surrounding the 3 smaller fires that preceded the Wattle 2 fire. As clarified during the inquiry by the officer in charge, these fires were only identified by investigating police during a bushfire season review conducted many months after the event. Fire 1, Second Creek Wattle State Forest Fire. The first fire, named the Second Creek Wattle State Forest Fire by the RFS, was located in the Wattle State Forest and detected by a member of Air Attack from the National Parks and Wildlife Service at 2:48 p.m. on 17 August 2019. At that time, the RFS did not consider this bushfire as one that met its criteria for a cause and origin investigation. Accordingly, no investigation was conducted. About 1 year later, on 26 August 2020, the RFS reviewed historical satellite imaging around the area of origin and identified a smoking tree on 13 August 2019 near the suspected point of origin. Your Honour sees there displayed the general area of origin. The suspected area of origin of the Second Creek fire was mapped by the RFS as originating to the west of Red Bank Road in the Wattle State Forest, bordering on private property. And Your Honour will see shortly a photograph of that particular area. This area of origin was attended by Senior Constable Drew and Mr. Fulliger. Senior Constable Drew determined that the cause of the Second Creek fire was undetermined. In his fire investigation review, Mr. Fulliger indicated that he observed macro indicators of fire, including angle of char and some foliage freeze, which suggested that the fire moved in an easterly and northerly direction. There were also indicators of backburning along and off the roads in the area. It appeared that there had been fire on the northern side of an unnamed road in the area, in that it had travelled in a northerly and easterly direction. He was unable to locate any hard containment lines on the northern or eastern perimeters of this particular fire. In oral evidence, Mr. Fulliger confirmed to the court that he was unable to determine the cause of the Second Creek fire when he attended the fire scene and concluded that the cause of the fire should be undetermined. Mr. Fulliger could not find the specific area of ignition at that point in time or any lightning data which indicated lightning in the fire area. He deemed the origin to be located where the burning tree was sighted on satellite imagery, where private land bordered the Washpool State Forest. This particular fire burned for over 2 weeks and burned about 703 hectares, including mainly state forest and private land and national park. I just have displayed now here on a fire progression map for that particular fire. Coming now to the second fire, or Fire 2, the Red Bank Road Kumbaja fire. On 8 September 2019, just over 2 weeks after the Second Creek fire had been declared out, the Red Bank Road Kumbaja fire was detected in the vicinity of Red Bank Road. It originated 400 metres north of the smoking tree identified above. The fire burnt for 10 days before it was declared out on 18 September 2019. The inquiry heard how the fire burnt 301 hectares of private land, 48 hectares of state forest, and 1.5 hectares of other land. And Your Honour will see on the screen now a fire progression map showing the Red Bank Road fire's progression. About a year later, on 25 September 2020, Senior Constable Drew, with the assistance of Mr. Fulliger, conducted an examination of the scene of the fire. Both observed macro indicators of angle of char on the trees and formed a view that the fire originated on the western side of the Red Bank Road between a dry creek bed used to contain the earlier fire and Red Bank Road. Senior Constable Drew was of the view that the fire cause was undetermined. He opined that the Red Bank Road fire and the Second Creek fire could be one continuous fire based on there being no hard containment lines separating the mapped area of the Second Creek and Red Bank Road fires, the height of char and angle of char on the trees throughout the area. Coming now to the third fire, Fire 3, Washpool 1 fire. The court heard of the treacherous weather conditions on 8 and 9 October 2019, causing erratic and anomalous fire behaviour. On 9 October 2019, about 3 weeks after the Red Bank Road fire was declared out, there was another fire which commenced in the Washpool State Forest. This fire was first mapped, this fire was first managed by the RFS under the same name as the former fire, but was renamed Washpool, Kumbaja fire, and later Washpool 1 fire. Evidence heard during the inquiry suggests that the Washpool 1 fire originated around 1.2 kilometres north of the area of origin of the Red Bank Road fire. And Your Honour will see shortly fire progression maps for 4 October and 10 October showing the location of the Washpool 1 fire relative to the Red Bank Road fire, which is shown as out. Washpool 1 fire, Your Honour, was declared out on 24 October 2019 after destroying 274 hectares of land, including state forest and private land. Senior Constable Drew and Mr Fulliger also investigated the cause and origin of this fire, again about a year later. During that examination, they observed the most predominant indicators as the angle of char. They formed a view that the fire travelled in a northerly direction on either side of Red Bank Road. Senior Constable Drew was of the view that the cause of the Washpool 1 fire was undetermined and likely a continuation of a previous fire. Mr Fulliger concluded that the Washpool 1 fire was likely caused by smouldering debris reigniting from either the first or second fire, or both. However, human intervention could not be discounted. He did not observe hard containment lines which had been constructed by machinery or humans for the first two fires or the Washpool 1 fire. Coming, if I may now, Your Honour, to Fire 4, Washpool 2 fire. During the inquiry, Your Honour heard evidence relating to the subject fire, the Washpool State Forest Kumbudja fire, known as Washpool 2 fire. The fire burned for over 10 weeks and damaged a total area of around 133,300 hectares, including private land, national park of significant heritage value and state forest. The fire further damaged or destroyed at least 15 residential structures. The Washpool 2 fire was first detected on 30 October 2019. This was about 6 days after the Washpool 1 fire was declared out. During the first week of the Washpool 2 fire, firefighting operations focused on containment. On 7 and 8 November 2019, weather conditions significantly deteriorated, with maximum temperatures being in the high 30 degrees with erratic fire movement. The Washpool 2 fire broke containment lines and burned out of control to the west, east and north. Displayed now, Your Honour, is a map that shows the extent of the spread of the fire on those days and up to 12 November 2019. The relevant fire is shown in shades of brown on this particular fire progression map. Over the next month, the fire continued to break containment lines before more favourable weather conditions assisted RFS crews with containment. On 25 November 2019, the Washpool Fire and Mile Creek Road fire merged. In early December 2019, the Washpool 2 fire was still active and more tactical burns were approved as weather conditions improved. On 7 January 2020, the Washpool 2 fire was declared out after it merged with the Mount Sparabo fire. Your Honour sees now a final fire progression map showing the total area burned by the Washpool fire. Of course, it's in brown, Your Honour. On 14 August 2020, Senior Constable Drew and Mr Fulliger attended the scene of this final fire. They attempted to access the assumed area of origin, but due to the number of fallen trees and time constraints, they were unable to reach that particular area. Based on his analysis of available maps and line scans, Mr Fulliger formed the view that the Washpool 2 fire was caused by a reignition of the Washpool 1 fire. Senior Constable Drew concluded that the cause of the Washpool 2 fire was undetermined, owing to evidence of human activity, including the use of heavy machinery and farming practices. He couldn't determine a specific area of origin, however, determined some approximate points of origin for each fire. And Your Honour sees just now Senior Constable Drew's annotated satellite map identifying each of the relevant fires. Mr Fulliger provided oral evidence to the court that in reviewing the Washpool 2 fire, he obtained data from the RFS Services Incident Management System, ICON, and in his opinion was based on line scan review and mapping. In respect of the methodologies used to conduct his fire investigation review, drafted in early November 2020, Mr. Fulliger told the court of the difficulties associated with the locations of the fires, including the steep terrain and regrowth of vegetation. Mr. Fulliger opines that the Washpool 2 fire was a reignition from the Washpool 1 fire and a reignition of the 2 previous fires. Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of evidence comprising 487 pages, which includes statements from New South Wales Police, fire investigation review prepared by the RFS mapping and investigative documents, lightning strike data and weather observations. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquiry concerning a fire is required to make findings as to the date and place of the fire and the circumstances of that fire. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to any matter connected with the fire inquiry. In this inquiry, the focus was on identifying where and when the Washpool 2 fire originated and the circumstances of same, including the cause. Coming now to Fire 1. Mr. Richard Woods, an adjunct lecturer in wildfire investigation and a former inspector and superintendent of the ACT and New South Wales Rural Fire Service, was engaged to review documents, including RFS documents, lightning strike data, cause and origin statements from New South Wales Police, and weather observations relating to the Washpool fire. Mr. Woods did not attend the scene for a number of reasons, including the significant passage of time which had elapsed since the fire. He formed the view that the cause of the Second Creek fire is undetermined. He told Your Honour that there is a lack of evidence in relation to a number of potential causes, therefore they remain unresolved. Mr. Woods received lightning strike data obtained within a 50-kilometre radius of that particular smoking tree to which I have referred, which shows no lightning strikes in the vicinity of the smoking tree. Therefore, he eliminated lightning as a cause of this fire. Mr. Woods states that if the smoking tree is considered the origin of the Second Creek fire, it could have been burning for several days or possibly weeks before it was detected. Turning now to Fire 2. In respect of the second fire, Mr. Woods provided evidence to the court that he agreed with Senior Constable Drew that the cause of the Red Bank Road fire is undetermined. Mr. Woods was of the view that southwesterly winds may have enhanced any remaining fuel resulting in embers from the Second Creek fire being carried by wind, or the movement of that fire burning into vegetation as it progressed across the containment. Mr. Woods was able to eliminate a number of potential causes, including campfire, smoking, debris burning, juvenile play and railway infrastructure. He could not discount others and could not eliminate a re-ignition of the earlier fire as the potential cause of the Red Bank Road fire. It is his view that prevailing winds could have caused a spot over or ignition from that first fire. Mr. Woods opined that lightning could not be eliminated as a potential cause of the Red Bank Road fire, therefore remained unresolved on the basis that there were 18 recorded lightning strikes from 29 to 30 August 2019 within 5 kilometres of the burnt area identified in lightning strike data. Mr. Woods opined in relation to Fire 3 that the cause of the third fire was undetermined. He noted that it was plausible that any remnants of smouldering fuel near the northern western boundaries of the Second Creek and Red Bank Road fires possibly resulted in embers being carried by wind or the movement of fire burning in vegetation progressing north into unburnt fuel, resulting in the ignition of the third fire. Mr. Woods eliminated a number of potential causes for this fire, including juvenile play and railway infrastructure. He determined that campfire or smoking was unlikely as a cause of this fire. He further noted that some other potential causes remained unresolved, such as a deliberate act and equipment use. Lightning as a potential cause also, in his opinion, remained unresolved. Coming to the fourth and final fire, Fire 4, Mr Woods was of the view that the fourth fire, the Washpool 2 fire, subject to Your Honour's inquiry, resulted from an undetermined cause. He did not consider that there was enough evidence to determine that the fire was one continuous fire as opposed to a number of separate fires. He did indicate that it was possible that the fire was a reignition of a previous fire, more likely the preceding fire known as the Washpool 1 fire. Further, Mr Woods told Your Honour that the area of origin hadn't been clearly identified, making the ability to ascertain the cause of the fire difficult. Based on his review of the available records, Mr Woods determined that there was extensive lightning activity in the area leading up to the ignition on 30 October 2019. And Your Honour will see that now on display. However, Mr Woods said without a specific area of origin, it was difficult to ascertain whether the lightning activity contributed to the ignition of the fire. It is submitted that the Washpool 2 fire ignited on or around 30 October 2019 in an area proximate to Red Bank Road in the Washpool State Forest. The cause of the fire remains undetermined due to insufficient evidence. Finally, Your Honour, those assisting, Your Honour, express their sincere gratitude to those who have aided and provided information to the court to assist with the coronial inquiry into the Washpool State Forest Kumbudja fire. Your Honour, that concludes our oral submissions in relation to that fire. May it please, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr Castleton. Is there anything else that we need to deal with today?
That concludes today's proceedings, Your Honour. For the benefit of my learned friends, tomorrow, Your Honour, we'll hear closing address in relation to the North Black Range Fire, Pallarang, Gulf Road Fire, Emmaville and Torrington, Bees Nest Fire, Guy Fawkes River National Park, Liberation Trail, and my learned friend, Ms Ward, Senior Counsel, and Mr Wilcox will address Your Honour in relation to those 4 fires.
Thank you, Mr Castleton. Mr Newton, unless there's anything else, we'll adjourn.
Nothing further, Your Honour.
Thank you. We'll adjourn till 10 a.m. tomorrow.
May it please the Court.